Please put your cell phones in silent mode. Yep, including our speaker. Are there any announcements that anyone would like to make about any events coming up or anything that this group might like to hear about? I don't see anybody. Okay. I have one announcement. Many of you know Pat Willie, who has created the Ferndale Concord. Unfortunately, this year it is canceled, so it will not happen this June. So, our speaker today is Ed Holloway. Ed's lifelong fascination with automobiles began in a bustling household of 6 sons, where classic Fords like the Model T, Model A, and even a 1934 Ford Woody, famously featured in Disney's 1965 film, That Darn Cat, were constant presence. This early passion led him to become a dedicated docent at the Black Hawk Museum in Danville since its opening in 1988, a role he continues to embrace today. Beyond his commitment to the museum, Ed has also served as the director of the Northern California region of the Classic Car Club of America and as editor of the quarterly publication, The Classic Overview. On a more personal note, Ed's enthusiasm for cars hasn't deterred his wife, Sue Yin, who he reconnected with and married 15 years ago after their 45th high school reunion. It seems her understanding of his hobby addiction is truly remarkable. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Ed Holloway.
Hi. I'm so pleased to see so many here. I really am. What a nice compliment to Mr. Whittell. For those of you, I've been talking to so many here who know a lot about George Whittell. So I'm hoping I can say something that they don't know. I'd like to introduce my friend Ed Zaki, who I've known for many years. Who's my chauffeur here. Very special people, Bob Devlin, boards, members, all the members who are here from the Classic Car Club. I'm so delighted and very honored to have just very special people here. It's a very nice compliment. Let's just start with this. How many have not heard of George Whittell Jr.? Have not heard of him? Okay, fair. How many have been to the Thunderbird Lodge? Great, love it. How many have one of his Duesenbergs? Speaking of Duesenbergs, I have a list from AQ, Automotive Quarterly, of all of his Duesenbergs at the front table here, but I have some left over if you had not picked one up. Okay. It all started years ago at the Black Hawk Museum that we had his Duesenberg J162, which was the 29 Roadster, on the floor. I had no idea who Whittell was, knew nothing about the car, but I liked the car. The thing that fascinated me was it had these claw marks from his pet lion, Bill. So whenever I was talking about it, I used to talk about the claw marks. Look for the claw marks. That was my first introduction to Mr. Whittell, and then his Duesenbergs. And that was what started me going. And then I started to do some research on him that dates back to 2019, 2018, and I went everywhere you can imagine, and then some. And then COVID stopped everything. I was coming across my PowerPoint. I gave a PowerPoint presentation to the museum. I came across that, added a lot to it, and then you're getting the result of all that. So let's see what we have here. financial foundation, Whittell and Nicholas Looney were the two grandparents, and one was in Ireland, one was born in Germany. And I would say that they came for the gold rush. One came to finance grub stakers, and one got involved in San Francisco. And then after the gold rush was faltering out, they came into the city. You can see where Whittell left to his son George Sr. 57,700, which today is almost 2 million. But Looney left 6.85 million back in those days, and that got George Sr. off to a roaring start. Whittell had 5 children. One was a daughter named Clara, and Clara married into the Folger family, and then lived here in Woodson. And then they decided to marry and join their groups. So this is George Sr. Actually was a very conscientious man, very precise, was very kind of serious. And he was even a little bit serious one day when he brought home this 12 years after George Jr., who was born in 1881. 12 years later, he brought home this little baby. He told his wife, well, this is my brother's child, and I think we should raise him. Well, the baby they named Alfred was a result of a romantic moment between him and his secretary, Grace McGregor. And he was brought up as a Whittell, and did great honor to the family, and the family didn't. His stepbrother George Jr. never quite accepted him, unfortunately. Although Alfred adored his older brother. Here they are, George Whittell Jr. and Alfred. You know, when you're a young man and you inherit all this money, it's hard to get serious about life. He wasn't too serious, at least in his younger days. This is George Jr. His brother was very serious. George was in the first, might as well talk about. Okay. George was actually a twin. He had a twin brother named Nicholas who died 3 years later of diphtheria. And then Alfred came into his experience. So the Whittell family in San Francisco, very, very well connected. They were in all the social columns, high tea this and that. Their sons were on all the scandal sheets. And that's just the way it was. And they fixed him up with a wedding to a well-established San Francisco family. George comes home and introduces this woman on the left. Florence Berlier. I'm married to her. And the father says, no, you're not. And he made arrangements. They paid her something like $2,500 or something. Made arrangements to have it annulled. And although the story was out. Then he married the love of my life, Josephine Cunningham, who I think was really was a good person. She was a member of this called Floridora Sextet, which is a dancing group that traveled around the world. That's what she did, and it caught his eye. So he came home married to her. What are you going to do? And they were married for 3 years. She got into movies. She was an actress. She was in 70 movies. She kept her last name as Whittell, and became actually a very good character actress in movies that you would have seen if you looked at what she was in. And Josephine let's see. When George Whittell Jr. Got married to Elliot, who we're going to talk about, he gave George as a gift a baby lion that Bill named Bill. That with the understanding, she said, well, he's tamed all of those women, all of those animals. Let's see if he can tame this lion. And he became his constant friend. They went everywhere. He was always driving around. They would go into different shops, into restaurants and all that. They were really buddies. They were real buddies. Okay, there's a story that I'm going to mention this because I have a little bit of doubt. It makes sense. But I contacted Bailey Martin, the circus, Martin and Bailey twice into the research department, and they never heard of George Whittell Jr. It makes sense. He's a young man. He has all this money. He needs Frank bring him back alive. Buck had the knowledge of animals. He was catching them for zoos, and it makes sense. But I have not been able to verify that. And I'm probably wrong, but I just wanted to throw that out. Okay, George, born in 1881. This is 1903 Mars Type Z. The Mars Type Z was the first car that was that had powered by a gas combustion engine to win a race. It was a very, very expensive French car, and very few were in the country. When this was taken, this is in 1903. I'm going to assume it's 1903. Very few, and it was fast. It set a, I think it was a Paris to Vienna race. He finished at about an average of 76.07 miles, which is sizzling. And supposedly it can go up to 80 miles an hour. But let's see. It was the only car that can compete with the Le Bazar, which was the best car. That was the car that they actually started when most cars, maybe all cars, had the engine in the back. This is the first car to get it straight. Engine in the front, transmission, drivetrain in the back. We were the first car to make that step. Of course, everybody followed them. Here's the Speedster. Became well known. Okay. Now this is supposedly their residence, or at least a home that was designed for them for Nob Hill. They lived at 1155 California, which was right across from the Crawford Estate, which makes them directly opposite Grace Cathedral today. Now this rendering was done by Ernest Coxwell, who did their home in Alameda as well as Alfred's house in Pacific Heights. And this came from the San Francisco Library, and the comment was from the research department, this is what we have. We don't have verification that this was actually built, but you can get a clue about the type of house they would be living in. Okay, this is a well-known story, made in papers. It was a story after the earthquake that George Sr. and George Jr. jumped in their car and raced up to Nob Hill to save whatever they could save from their home and, the better items. This is not them, but I would say it kind of suggests what they would be driving. This is 1906. This is the Whittell building, under construction. It was completed in 1907. Here it is, right across the street, 166 Gary, right across the street from where you gals like to go, Neiman Marcus. Still there. So what they did was they took everything that they could save and could fit in the car to the harbor, and took the ship over to their home in Alameda. Now this is their Alameda home, still standing and all that. And Ernest Coxwell, architect. And they had a whole lot of land. In the early days, in those days, people with money would have a place in Alameda for their, that would be warmer for their cold winters or evenings. And that's what they did. This is the inside. As you can see, it was really cozy. And this was, the gal that I met was selling this home. And this is photos from the listing service, just to give you an idea of what the house was all about. The captain and Elia lived here after he came back from after the war. This is where they lived. It's also where Hugh lived when he died. Okay, now this is one of my chief peeves about this. You have a guy with money, a family with money. He decides to get involved with World War I, and he actually went to Italy to start. And they make him an ambulance driver. Kind of like saying as Ernest Hemingway, ambulance driver. He gets out of the service and he's a captain. And the same thing, they say he won all of these awards. I checked as far as I could check the validity of the awards that this guy supposedly received. I couldn't find it anywhere. You'd see it in newspaper headlines, couldn't find it anywhere. So Bill Watson, who's director of the Thunderbird Lodge in Tahoe, told me, we all know this, families with money would buy their sons awards and different positions of authority and all that. So I really question that. Okay, after the war, he meets this woman, actually. Elia Pascal was a volunteer nurse in the war. And he met Elia. Her father was a very successful attorney. They had 1,000 acres. She was brought up well, spoke many languages, as did Junior, the captain. And they got married. His parents' absolute delight. Okay, here we are right here in Woodside. George Sr. in 1900, bought 100 acres in Woodside. And then it was just, a lot of acres. But he saw this 50-acre parcel on 187 Kings Mountain Road. And those from Woodside that would know, Kings Mountain, the next street is Tripp. 50 acres went all the way from Kings Mountain to Tripp. And a pretty good hunk of land. He bought this in 1910, something like that. Finally built the house, 50 acres of really splendor. You had the trees, and you had the the flowers, and you had the roads to get there. You had the estate, 7,800 square feet. And it also has the Hayward Fault that comes down the middle of it. They don't mention that when you're trying to sell it. Now on Tripp, there is the carriage house. For those who know the area, I'm sure you've seen the carriage house. The carriage house, when the senior passed on in 1922, so Junior took possession of the estate, he had a tunnel built from the tunnel carriage house downstairs to the basement of the theater. Now this theater, 4,000 square foot theater, Junior had built after he moved in. And the idea is, people would come into the carriage house and go through a tunnel to the basement of the theater to the play area, I guess. He used to watch a lot of the he was very much back as a techie, and he was the first to get a lot of photo equipment and had an aerial on his property in Woodside. So he was very, was always thinking ahead in that regard. So you had your Roman setting to complete that thought. The person who purchased the house when Elliot passed on was Mark Markula, and he retired as the CEO of Apple. So he bought this place, destroyed the house, and the theater was standing. So I contacted him, and I understand all this information. Can you imagine, for years, all of this information in the garage of the theater? I mean, can I come over? And he says he sent it all to Tahoe, and I wasn't even invited over to look at the place. And so the Thunderbird Lodge people, they have all that. This is when George Sr. died, and then basically left $30 million to George Jr. He invested heavily in real estate, and cashed out to $50 million prior to the crash. $50 million. He moves to Nevada, buys half the state. He bought 40,000 acres. He bought 27 miles on the Tahoe coast, and started to build a home, his first home that he could build himself. Now, the Thunderbird is very important in the Indian folklore. It represents the animal that brings them thunder and has a great existence in their lives, great power. And this is the Thunderbird Lodge, and Whittell kind of carried on that theme. It was a great thought. And this is how it looked. It was designed by a guy named Frederick Longcamps. He was considered the #1 forever, the only one architect that was the best. The irony is that he had no formal education. He got his basic training going to San Francisco right after the earthquake, and started doing architecture work there, and then came up and then went up to Nevada. The nice thing is very rustic, it's very low key, which kind of fits his lifestyle. Gets away from the formal big house in Woodside and comes home to this home. By the way, the 40,000 acres purchased in 1931 cost him $2.7 million, which came up to $81 an acre. Not a bad deal. So this is the card room. He has a place where he played cards, high stakes, late into the night. He had some very interesting people. I mean, people that we would love to meet: Ty Cobb, Jack Dempsey, and even, I understand, Pretty Boy Floyd, the gangster. And from the card house, you would go through this tunnel. It's the only way to go through the tunnel. The tunnel was a 30-foot drop, and it went out 300 yards. And that's how you got to the coast, to the lake. And you had lots of people coming and going. At night, when the entertainers closed the clubs in Tahoe, they would take his boat or a boat to the tunnel, and they would come up and have some parties there. There's Thunderbird yacht. Designed by renowned runabout, architect John Hacker. John Hacker, in his early days, roomed with Henry Ford, so they were good friends all their life. It was John Hacker who conceived the concept of a runabout with the bottom of the boat coming into the water like that, which gave the boat the ability to cruise very much quicker. So he designed the Thunderbird boat or yacht. Built in 1940 for $87,000. In 1942, the government put out a cry that we need, give us your metal and give us your anything. He hid the boat for a couple of years to keep it out of their hands. It had two World War II P-38 1,000 horsepower engines. Tops out at 70 miles an hour. Pretty fast. This is a picture of Elliot and Alfred on the Thunderbird. They also had an Air Force, he calls it his Air Force. Then he also calls it his flying yacht. Now this is a custom-made EC4 1,000 HP, 1,100 horsepower engines, 107 feet long, and had all this lounge, dining room, master suite, sleeping quarters for four. The first airplane with a shower, not too bad. He also had what's called the Grumman Goose. The Grumman Goose was a seaplane, so for him to go from Woodside to his home in Tahoe, he would take the Goose, and of course it would land in front of his place. Okay, there were certain people that I needed to include. One would be Eric Lobencourt. Eric Lobencourt was, the old story. He had to go to work as a kid to support his family because his father passed on. Had several jobs. Got involved in cars. People realized how sharp this guy was. Auburn hired him to run it. He said, "Don't pay me any money, just give me stock." He turned Auburn into a very successful company and made him a millionaire. So that's Cord. You can see some of the things he did. His car, his own car, the Cord 29, actually Duesenberg 28 December, Cord in 29, and then closed his businesses in 38. He was so popular, well known, that he was on the cover of Time magazine twice in the 1930s. He was actually fairly well known and respected. Then we have the Duesenberg brothers, German-born, raised in Iowa. Not necessarily educated, but they were absolute. Fred was an absolute self-taught engineer, automotive engineer. Fred was what it was all about. August kind of helped it along, but it was Fred Duesenberg who was the genius. This is some of their innovations. Jimmy Murphy's 1921 French Grand Prix win, and this is him crossing the finish line. First time an American took the Grand Prix, which is it's now called Le Mans. Who was the first American to take Le Mans? It was Journey. It's Ford. What? 1866. It wasn't Phil Hill. It wasn't Shelby. Gurney. I think it was Gurney. 66, 67, 68. Okay, this is first American winner. That's him, number 12. The fourth place, he was number 1, Duesenberg, Jimmy Murphy, and a couple other guys. Fourth place was Andre Dubonnet, driving a Duesenberg. And most people, or many people say, who? It was Dubonnet, who later had built the Tulip Wood Tour, or racer, torpedoes called, with tulip wood, supposedly. Someone told me it was actually British Honduras mahogany. but he was of the Appetit family, so he had nothing but money and time. This car we had at the museum for years and years and years. Very light, very fast. It's a Hispano Suiza, 1924. Okay, there were a couple things that Fred and Augie really introduced to the world. First, to introduce it inline 8, straight arrow, 8 cylinders, and which was fast. And then Fred gave us hydraulic brakes. First car that had hydraulic brakes. The only other car until it caught on. The only problem is he didn't bother patenting that invention. And then what happened was what happened is Fred Duesenberg was going south. Some of the things that Duesenberg did in their Indy 500 races. What I like is 70% supercharged powered engines produce 32, finishing in the top 10, a 46% average. And this is the difference in the two engines. One is a regular Duesenberg 320 horsepower. 265 horsepower. Now, at the time, let's say 1930, three-piece Packard, Pierce, Arrow, and Peerless. The Peerless had about 120 horsepower. Packard had 165, and Pierce Arrow was about 140, something like that. Then you have a car like the Duesenberg, 265 horsepower. I mean, that's unbelievable. They were so far ahead. And then if you decide to put a supercharger on it, it pushes up to 320 with a top speed. And that's what he had in the races. So no one beat them. Okay, so Duesenberg wins led to Duesenberg sales. This is in the early 20s. However, Model A is the first car that came out with, about 650 were built. And then they came out with the next model that 13 were built, and of the 13, 8 have survived, and Jay Leno has one in his collection. And then they have a third one called the Model Y that most people don't know about. Fred said, well, let's do one just to kind of, then Cord comes on and says, get rid of that car. I'm going to give you something special. Well, then he went and catered to Cord's demands, but he kept the car. That's at the ACD Museum in Auburn. So Cord always had his eyes set on Duesenberg. These are reasons why. He started, the word was out December 1, 1928. They built 500 chassis because they were planning to sell 500 a year. And all this, it made front page news everywhere, not just in New York, but everywhere. Supposedly, Wall Street paused for a minute to honor this chassis price from $6,500, and it took individual design coach build bodies. Every body was different. Every body was custom to the owner's specifications, which doubled the price. So you're talking about 13 to much more, almost 20, some over 20,000 to 20 grand at the down south at the Nethercut was supposedly it sold for 20,000. But Skip Marquet said that wasn't right. They wanted 20, but they didn't quite get it. Skip was director of the Black Hawk Museum at one time. So you had 3 gears, you had 92 in second with another gear to go. That would push it to 112, 119 plus. fastest car in the country in the 20s and the 30s. No one beat a Duesenberg. But then there's Walter Murphy. Most of the Duesenbergs, or I should say Walter Murphy, coach builder out of Pasadena, designed more Duesenbergs than any other coach builder. This is a little bit of information. The 481 J Duesenbergs built, 140 were bodied by Murphy, 29%. Not bad. Then we have the chief of design, Frank Hershey. He's at the Black Hawk Museum back in his day. He designed more cores than any other designer. There's a little story that Frank told me that Frank was always a little more on the edge in his design. And they were putting together a bunch of renderings for cord to look at. This is at Murphy. And Frank said, well, these are my designs, I like them. Nah, get out of here. Well, these are my designs, now get out of here. Well, Cord came, he slipped him in the pack. Cord comes by, Cord was a man of definite decision. He was fairly, he was 5, 6, or 7, like that. Quick-minded, quick thinking, swore. He comes in the room and he didn't want to spend more time than needed, kept going through this and stopped when he saw Frank Hershey's renderings. Now, this is what I want. He said, this is what I want. So they clicked. And that's why he designed so many of these great cars, not just cords. His mother was taught to drive by Henry Leland, who was an early pioneer. As his chauffeur taught her to drive, the family purchased a second home built in Beverly Hills. Kind of fun. These are Murphy designs. The car on the right was Buster Keaton's car. The one below that is Abner Doble's car, his personal car. And he created the Doble steamer, the last steamer to survive, and it was also, most of those bodies, if not all of them, were designed by Murphy. Advertising for Duesenberg was kind of low key. They didn't advertise speed, they advertised comfort, and of course, status. Okay, this is the first car, and one driven the most by Junior. It's one of the last roadsters, Duesenberg roadsters, where the top did not disappear. The big car, their most successful, was the disappearing top roadster. And this is the last of the old one. Let's see, he was the official California Fire Marshal, which allowed him the right to have the siren and these lights in the front, the red and green light, which got him out of a lot of tickets, actually. This is one of my favorites. This is 1929 Berlin. And it has a long wheelbase by Murphy. We have this in the collection in Blackhawk for a lot of years. It has kind of a lean back, ready to go. Don Williams, who was director of the museum, said this was the only car he has seen where it's beautiful as you walk around. It's beautiful at every angle. Not too bad. The original color of the top is white, and the current owner is Sam Lehrman. And when they stripped the car, they saw the white paint, so he brought it up to its original color. The car we just saw, the 162 and the 218 that we just saw, had these stripes, 14 of them strips, so that it would balance the car from the rear and then to kind of mimic the radiator, the lines of the radiator. It shows you the dashboard and how the relationship of the fenders, how they relate to the curving rear fenders. This is kind of fun. What separates the Berlin from a town car is the town car had a window behind the seat that didn't come down. So the only way you could talk to the driver is with a phone. Berlin was more informal. A Berlin could be driven by the owner, or could be used as a show car, as a town car. And so there are some people that think it's the same. They are not the same. But it has all these wonderful things. You have a speedometer in the back of the front seat, and a phone contact. And look how exquisite that interior is. Okay, you have a Murphy logos stamped into the, as you enter the car. And then you have this wonderful, this car is very unique because you have these wonderful doors that go into the top of the car, allowing more space for a person to enter. And this was a Frank Hershey concept. And Duesenbergs are usually judged by their J numbers. You have your engine number, you have your different numbers, but it's the J number right here is what they all seem to use through time. And that was located on the bell housing. It became the standard way that Duesenbergs had done. Okay, so I'm a young Dose and I'm learning something I know nothing. We had this car displayed up above, and this guy, I'm taking my notes, and the curator was giving was talking about it. The guy slithers up to me, leans over, and he says, "What's that car worth?" You know, I had like a clue. And I said, "I don't know, why?" And he said, "I used to own that." "Really?" And I said, "Why'd you sell it?" He said, "I was going through divorce." And then I said, "What'd you sell it for?" $40,000. So this is back in 88, 89, early 89. And this is what he gave me in a letter to kind of verify all that. He sold it to Bill Harris because of his divorce. And then he kind of kept track on it. This is George Newhall. Some of you might know George. He lives in Sausalito. I'm sorry he couldn't be here today. So that car, last time Sam Larriman bought it, and this is what it went for at Goody in 2019. Should have hung on to it.
We should have never got here.
Okay, then we have the Botel Speedster. This is the one in Joe Mozart's collection. If you've been there, you've seen this car. George Whittell, he drove this car about 10 times. Nice to have money, huh? I'd like to point out the gauge, the dashboard had 14 different gauges, including altimeter and chronometer and brake pressure gauge, chassis lubricator, lights to tell you when to change the oil. And also the speedometer is the first car to list 150 miles. Did it go 150 miles an hour? No, but it was the first to list that. And this is, it's a, you can see, it weighs 600 pounds, but you would never know. And a nice thing, the polished aluminum, it was presented, it was a very long car, but you didn't know about it. There was 3/16 of aluminum thickness on top, but it was brushed, it was brushed nicely, and it came down over the side of the car, the aluminum, to make it appear to be thinner, less bulky. Then you had the rigid coupe. You know, I like this car for various reasons. It was sold many years ago, and supposedly the home of it is somewhere in Dubai, is at least the rumor. It resembled a convertible, but was not built on a long wheelbase. And it also had what's called a freewheeling in it. The freewheel was designed by Fred Duesenberg, and the whole idea was when we were driving it, it would release the drivetrain from the engine when the accelerator is relaxed. And Whittell didn't know this, or he just kept pushing on the gas, and he blew it up, parked it to the side of the road, and never drove it again. This is another Berlin. Everything on this it has what's typical of a Murphy design. One thing to point out, it has these very thin window. It's called window filler, called clear vision, steeply raked windshield. This was rebodied by Bowman and Schwartz and returned to the factory by Whittell for partial payment on Wayman, which was his next car. Now this car, Wayman, when you talk about Wayman is usually fabric bodies. They made planes in the First War, fabric, because they were lighter, could travel faster and quicker. And so Wayman bodies were known for that. So when he decided to do this from Wayman, they used those features. This was only two Gordon Brewery's designs of this car. And by the way, not surprising that it very closely comes to comparison with Gordon Brewer's 1935 851 Speedster. Lots of similar feelings, lots of similar things about it. What a surprise. The body is so narrow that the door had to be slightly curved. And the shape of the fenders reflect that of the body. Very cool car. This was the one Duesenberg Whittell had where he said I could actually get a ticket with the car standing still. Then we have this. This is the Jesse McDonald mistress car. There is no proof of this car being purchased by Whittell. Jesse McDonald was a stripper from Los Angeles. He bought the car for her, and there's no evidence that he no bill of sale or anything. That's all we know. Randy Ema, I emailed him on this. I said, what are the chances of that being a real Whittell car? He said, I'm 99% sure. So I emailed him back and said, great, how do we prove that? Still waiting to hear back from him. Okay, family finale. Hugh Whittell was kind of a character. He was still very much alive, and in the days when the graveyards were west of the city, because there weren't any homes out there, and as the city expanded west, they had to dig up the grave, move down to Coma. But he had this pyramid with all these thoughts that about his life and what he's learned and all that, which I've given to you guys. And then when he died, they moved him to Coma. That is now his gravesite in Coma. Now this is the family mausoleum. Note that they have their own little group of land, property. I looked inside and there were a lot of Whittells and a lot of Lunas there, maybe a few others. And it's interesting to note that what's not there is Hugh's grave, because they used his pyramid. And guess who else? Alfred. Alfred Whittell is right here, short distance from Hugh's pyramid. For some reason, I guess he didn't qualify to be part of the mausoleum. The mother said, I'm going to leave half of my money to each of you but didn't put it in writing. You know, the audit didn't put it in writing thing. And then Alfred had to go to court to fight for an undisclosed amount. Leaving the courtroom, Whittell Jr. said, well, that was sweet and easy. So I don't know how much he got or anything like that. So Whittell dies in 1969 at 87. And all that I've heard, the gentleman was saying about his thoughts about what he felt he should have given out or might have given out. I got this from the city of Woodside from their files, and flip a coin. Very much in animal causes. He had a number of animals. Bill wasn't the first. I mean, he wasn't by himself. He was the first. He had mingled the elephant that he loved. He used to give entertainment on weekends to neighbors for Mingle to do his thing. He had Chino, which was the cheetah that was Elliot's favorite animal, was there. And they located both on Woodside and back and up at the island, up at the Thunderbird Lodge. Until the 40s, Whittell was getting a little bit tired, couldn't keep up with these animals, and donated them to various zoos, including Bill. I'd like to close. This seems very fitting. This is from Dorothy Hill, a Woodside neighbor and friend, who said the captain had driving energy and broad interest, who was also very kind, but didn't enjoy strangers. He was very polite and very sweet, but he didn't want to see a lot of people, just his friends. It was kind of a lonely household, which kind of brings out perhaps what it's all about. I'm gonna, if we have some time, I want to ask anyone to share their wonderful thoughts, but I'm going to start with Bob Mull. Bob Mull, when he was a student at College of San Mateo, actually lived there. He was hired by Elliot Whittell. And Bob, I'd like to ask if you can say a few words.
Well, Dorothy Hill.
Stand up, please.
Give him the microphone.
What you'd like you to say. Tell about a couple times you met him.
Well, I only met, in the 2.5 years I lived there, I only met George twice. And I didn't meet him, I was going to the office at one time and I had to go down the hallway. The bathroom that George used was on the right, the office was on the left. And I happened to look to the left, to the right, and George was standing at the basin, brushing his teeth, and he turned towards me and shut the door. That was the first time I saw him. The second time I saw him was a couple of years later, and he was in the hospital bed. Mrs. Whittell had made some broth for him, and I had to take it into Sequoia Hospital, and I set it on his tray, his table tray, and I just walked out, and Mrs. Whittell was there with him. But that was the only 2 times I ever actually saw George.
Did he talk to you at all?
Never.
Never.
No. He was a recluse. He didn't talk to almost anybody. But Dorothy Hill is the one that got me the job at Whittell's.
Oh.
Because Ruth Casey was George's nurse. And she and Mrs. Whittell got along just fine, but they didn't talk much because she was 24 hours a day with Mr. Whittell. So Mrs. Whittell had Veronique. I think that was Mrs. Whittell's lady in waiting or whatever you'd call it. Mrs. Whittell's. And so I would be there for Mrs. Whittell.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
Wonderful presentation. I really, hi, my name is Greg Birkin. Sort of a tech entrepreneur. Started one of the very first Apple Macintosh software companies. I also did the pilot episode of Vantage Roadshow. I've also had the car Pebble Beach, and I'm a sort of a historian. I enjoyed your presentation immensely. I wanted to add to a couple things you said. First of all, the charity that George gave to at the end wasn't specified specifically in his will. And so something like 30 animal rights organizations sued the estate to try to get part of it. This was the longest contested thing, and they all, I guess, equally split it up or something. So it benefited a lot. He was such an animal devotee that he benefited a lot of organizations. It was fantastic. His lion, Bill, you can actually visit Bill today. Does anyone know that? What's left of Bill? Bill, so I'm fortunate to know Mike Marcola, and as you mentioned, he purchased the estate and Sound Winery, and when they were digging there, they dug up the bones of Bill. And what did they do with them? They gave them to Buck's Restaurant on 280. They're framed on the wall of Buck's. If you go to Buck's Restaurant, you can actually see the bones. It's fascinating. I have a picture on my phone, I'll find it, but fascinating. But if you go back to the Moore's car that you were showing there, and that's what got me started about Whittell. I've been studying his history a long time, doing a film on him and stuff. But the Moores, he was racing that car at the Del Monte races in Monterey in 1903, and he won. He brings the car over from Paris, from France. As you said, it was the winning car. He had the money and the means to do that. And he brought the car over. He was so competitive that he was racing at the Del Monte racetrack and won the race. And on his way back from Monterey to San Francisco, he's in Oakland, and he's got some girls and people in it, and he has an accident. And the Moores crashes, and they impound it, the police impound it. So it's in a house in Oakland for about a month, and there were newspaper articles and stuff about it, and I actually tracked down where it was and that kind of thing. But he was so competitive that he won the races, and we have early photos of him racing. And the picture that's in this book, the Whittell Coupe, which is Gooding put this together when they sold which one, the last one. There's a picture in there, you can see it. But he was quite a bon vivant, racer, pilot, everything. So fascinating presentation. Thank you.
Well, one other. You guys are so kind. Oh.
Hi, my name is Reed Doff, and I want to thank the Lunch Bunch for inviting me up. I'm not exactly sure how I got an invitation, but I'm very glad. I'm from Lake Tahoe, and I came down, and I've had a wonderful time here. And George Whittell was a big part of Nevada, and I work at Harrah's Automobile Collection in Reno in the 60s. And Bill Harrah had just recently purchased the Wyman Speedster, which was an SJ Speedster when I was working there. I was in charge of research, and I remember that the car had 1,800 original miles on it. It was very rare, had all the original paint. It was a fascinating car. I don't remember too many of George Whittell's other Duesenbergs because I was just familiar with the one that he sold to Bill Harrah. And the other object that George Whittell had was the 1940 Hacker Thunderbird. And that got restored by Bill Harrah, and he put two V12 Allison engines in it. And there's quite a few stories related to that. But anyway, I want to thank you all for inviting me down. And this is a great bunch of people, and I've enjoyed being outside. And if you ever get to Lake Tahoe, stop by and say hello. And Bruce is my neighbor up there. He's with the candy store. I understand you groups get together quite frequently. And again, I just want to thank you for a lovely time down here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you folks for giving us your time and attention, and I hope you gain a little bit of what I have gained from my research. If any of you would like a copy of my PowerPoint presentation that's available to you, if you put your name, email address, and phone number on the table, there's a place for that. Did anyone not get the list of his Duesenbergs? Because I have a few left over. Okay.
I got it.
So I guess that's it, folks. Thanks so much for calling.
Thank you very much, Ed. Very enjoyable.
Sell that whole line. You can.
Good idea.